Pa-Q&A na.
Yeah.
Yeah, pupunta kami, babalik. Balik din ako mamaya.
Few seconds, Charles. Okay.
We're live now, sir.
Yes, and recording. Permission to record. Okay. Sige. Go ahead, Prof. Charles.
Okay, let me start today's webinar by sending you a warm welcome. Whether you're streaming via our YouTube live channel, that is Environmental Landscape Studio Laboratory, or you're joining us through our Zoom meeting, good morning to all of you. Did you miss us? Well, today is a very special day because we are back to our weekly Tuesday webinar series offered to you by the Environmental Landscape Studio Laboratory. I will not keep you waiting. To introduce our speaker for today, may we call on Professor Vic Dulaog? Sir Vic?
Yes, sorry. Yan. Okay. So good morning, everyone. So we're back with our webinars, no? And for today, we're very fortunate to have a very good speaker here. He's been a friend for the past 30 years plus, no? Something like that, no? So our speaker has 25 years of experience in landscape architecture in public realm design, no? In terms of consultancy, uh, project and management, specifically in uh, private and public sectors. No, he's been a panelist recently in landscape design and sustainability seminars in the Middle East, and uh, he graduated in the University of the Philippines around 1996, if I'm not mistaken, no. But after that, no, he joined IP Santos and Associates, no. So between 1996 and year 2000, he honed his skills, no. And IP Santos has a lot of influences in his future career, no. And after the year 2000, no, he is one of the what do you call that? He is one of the founder of SGS Designs Landscape Architecture, no. Sanyo Guerrero and Samak Designs Landscape Architecture. So from 2000 and 2002, they established the. Actually, it started way back 2000, no. But it was officially registered under DTI in the year 2000. So SGS Design came into fruition year 2000. And from 2002 to 2003, he has an extensive experience in China under Alliance. Okay. And from 2003 to present, he is currently based in the Middle East, specifically in Dubai. No, so from 2003 to 2010, uh, he worked under Katib, and 2010 to 2014, he worked under the municipality of Abu Dhabi. No, so the experience that he has on public realm is very very much varied. No, okay. At present, he is the head of landscape architecture and the public investment funds, no, technical team in Riyadh, uh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So let us all welcome Leo Gonzales. Okay, good morning.
Morning. Thank you, Vic, for the quite lengthy introduction. Yes, I've been practicing here since 2003 and have worked on various types of open spaces and public realm projects, from private to semi-government to government projects. Okay, so
Yes, Sir Leo, you can click on the share screen button at the
Okay.
bottom. Yan, pwede
all
na.
right. Sige. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so can you guys see my desktop?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So we're here to talk about organizing exterior spaces or open spaces in the landscape, when we design landscapes, when we design public realm, and other types of areas typically outside of the building. So that they could be parks, or they could be private properties, or roads, streetscapes, to name a few. First, let's check. Let's see how exterior spaces or open spaces are defined by a couple of publications. Dictionary of Landscape Architecture and Construction defines it as generally any land or area not covered with buildings, roads, parking lots, or pavements, whether a constructed or natural landscape. It usually refers to a park, recreational area, or natural area. Another book's defined open spaces or outdoor spaces, exterior spaces and landscapes. Residential Landscape Architecture by Norman Booth and James Hiss mentioned that in a design context, space is any three-dimensional void or hollowness contained by the sides or edges of surrounding elements. Now, this applies to interior spaces and exterior spaces. And then they go and say, they said, outdoor space can be perceived as space bound by physical elements of the environment, such as the ground, shrubs, basically planting, walls, fences, and structures around us. They also defined it further by identifying some physical considerations in space. So you've got the base plane, which is essentially, well, the floor of an outdoor space, okay? It supports all activities and site elements in the outdoor environment. It is where you place it. It is where you design it. It is the primary plane within the outdoor space that landscapes are designed. It's what you see on the plans that you prepare. And they say that good design, okay, starts with the function and the organization of space, of landscape spaces within the base plane. This is where all of the studies on functionalities and the layouts and linkages begin, on the base plane. And then you've got the vertical plane. Okay. Well, these are the upright structures that you have in the landscape, in the open space. You've got, your shrubs, you've got your trees, fences, you've got your building wall, or it could be a sloped face of a hill or a mountain that defines the vertical plane. And then you've got the overhead plane, which is, the underside of trees, the underside of canopies in buildings or pergolas or trellises. These are your physical considerations in your outdoor spaces. Why is this important? It's because when you plan, when you define, when you're creating open spaces, these are the three elements that is your basis for its arrangement. For example, vertical plane. You could either block like a utility that is unsightly by introducing the vertical plane into your space. Or you could open up the vertical plane if you are, let's say, if you're at an elevation and they have the view of the sea. So this is how these elements affect your definition and your design of your public spaces or your open spaces. The overhead plane, if you want to create intimacy, for example, in a particular space, you can provide an overhead plane on top of an open space. And if you want to exaggerate the expanse of the area above that space, you go ahead and open it. Then this would apply to, let's say, an internal courtyard in a building. So by opening up that space and letting the light in, and encouraging people to look up, then you're exaggerating, you are enhancing that space, even if typically like an interior courtyard is small. Okay, so when we are designing the landscape, we need to define, we need to create, and we need to generate new ideas for our open spaces. Typically, these are your considerations when you are defining and creating open spaces in the landscape. The elements, so, atmosphere, rainfall, sunlight, heat, wind. You consider these when you are creating an open space and when you are placing them around your site. And then, of course, you've got your client or your user requirements. If, let's say, for example, you're working on a villa, the client says, okay, I want a swimming pool, I want a big lawn area, then those are basically givens, types of spaces that you need to provide, that you need to address and locate and design within your open space. And then you've got your overall design vision, your principles, and your strategies. Later on, I have a project that explains how the design vision, the principles and strategies for a project from a very broad principle becomes more defined and then gets translated into actual spaces within the landscape, and then brought to to concept design level. Okay, and then you also need to consider the adjacent spaces around you and the uses for it. When you define and you create open spaces to complement them or to support them. Like, for example, if you're designing an area around let's say a museum, you could choose to create like a plaza space for um, for outdoor exhibits. At the back of the house where you have the kitchen and the service area, you provide a service space at the back to complement the kitchen or any of the utilities that are back there. So that's how the adjacent spaces and its uses would influence what type of spaces you create and where to put them. Okay, and then this one, the next one is very important. The generation of new ideas, activities, and elements in the landscape. This is when you've got your standard requirements from the client, your adjustments and your considerations from the environment, from the elements, your overall design philosophy, your adjacencies. But then, especially in bigger projects, as landscape architects or as designers of open spaces in the public realm, you need to generate new ideas, new uses, new types of spaces. In a project that I'm working on now, we have public realm park space that are right next to existing farms. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to come up with a concept wherein some parts of the farms could be experienced by park users, because typically farms are private properties. They have an issue with biosecurity, so not everybody can just go in and mess with the plants or the crops. But that is one sort of concept, one use that is not really done a lot, or I don't know if somebody else has explored something like that, but it is a relatively new concept that we want to introduce as part of the park experience and what we're designing. Okay, so in a lot of projects, especially if you want to make a difference, and if there's stiff competition in terms of saleability of projects, commercial success of projects, you need to create new ideas and very good ideas, exciting ideas, innovative ideas, define them and create them within the landscape that you're designing. And then you've got, your existing natural terrain, features, and other elements. Some boulders, for example, on a cliffside would influence you to provide a view deck there. Or maybe a trail, okay, so that people can interact with the natural features of the site. When you have an old building that has got high heritage value, then you consider that when you are defining and you're creating open spaces. And then there's scale. Different sizes of projects would require different approaches in creating and defining open spaces for them. Like, the spaces that you would create for a villa is going to be a lot different in terms of scale, in terms of usage, when you're doing, let's say, a resort, or maybe a park, or a bigger type of project. Connectivity. There are situations wherein you need to create spaces in order to enhance connectivities in your layout. Like, for example, if there's a junction, for example, in your pathways, okay, you create, let's say, a node that intersects the junction, so that you provide a focal point, you provide a sense of direction, you provide a proper intersection, not just a simple X intersection, but you have something there that has got better visibility. You create a landmark, and thus you're aiding in enhancing the design of your, let's say, your park. And then I mentioned earlier visibility and screening. When I mentioned the vertical plane, this is how it applies when you're defining your and you're creating your open spaces. You know you might assign a an area in your park wherein you're capitalizing on the views that the site offers, or as I mentioned earlier, when there are, let's say, some utilities that you want to screen, these help you define and create the types of open spaces that you place on your site. And then, of course, there's services and utilities. You create service areas when you have existing utilities that need to be serviced or for emergencies. I mentioned earlier, when you have a villa and you have the services in the back, then you create a service area for that. And there are a number of applications depending on the type of project and the size of the project. Now, these are our considerations. We've attempted to understand the basic elements that define a space and what our fundamental considerations are when we are defining them and when we are creating them and arranging them. But no, we haven't talked about arranging them. Organizing open spaces or site planning. I was thinking about how I would discuss that in a structured manner, but given that each site and each type of project will have their own characteristics, and you know, there are going to be different cases, different terrain, different considerations. I've prepared like 3 samples or 3 sample projects or case studies of varying sizes, so that I could illustrate better how these how the arrangement or the definition and the creation and the arrangement of open spaces apply. We'll first take a look at a residential project, which is, you know, very simple and straightforward. I'm sure, you know, everyone's come across something like this, but just to illustrate a very simple site planning and arrangement of open spaces in that type of landscape. And then we'll be looking at a boutique hotel or resort. This is a fine example of generating new ideas and activities to help sell a project, not just the landscape, but the entire project. And then a third one would be a public park. This one, I've included the full presentation that we prepared because it is quite extensive. And I mentioned earlier that point number 3 in the slide here, this project will help us understand how the design vision, principles, and strategies gets applied into a project. Okay, so I'll begin with residential landscape. This is a project in Dubai, sorry, in Abu Dhabi, that I worked on, I think about 5-6 years ago. The client requirements, he just wanted a grand entrance. He needed parking for 4 cars, a guest entrance, a swimming pool, and a service area at the back. So this is typical of villas in the Middle East, wherein they like the frontage to look nice. They usually have more than 2 cars because a lot of these families they share a villa, so they're like us, wherein the head of the family owns the property, and then sometimes his kids, even if they are already married, would still be staying in the villa. So it's typical to have 3 or 4 cars in a villa. Guest entrance, because villas here typically have an entertainment room called the Majlis, associated with that's basically their living room, entertainment room. So they want a separate guest entrance for that area and to the dining area. They've got the space and they could afford putting up a swimming pool, so they're looking for that. And they've got a service area at the back.
Hello, Sir Leo.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think your slides have yet to move. We're still seeing the defining and creating open space in the landscape slide.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me reshare.
All right,
Okay.
no problem.
Okay, case study. These are the client requirements, like I mentioned earlier. Okay. Now, this is the plan prepared by the architect. That's the original design when they approached us. They've got the villa. They've got the. Can you see my cursor? So this is the
Yep.
main entrance.
Yes,
They've
sir.
got.
Yes.
Got a couple of utility blocks up front. I don't know why they put those in there. That's the main entrance. This is their Majlis. This is a separate entertainment space for ladies. Their main living room is over here. This is their dining room. This is like their breakfast nook. This entire area is the kitchen at the back. And there are a couple of service bedrooms at the back here. This is a storage and a bedroom at the back. So as you can see, the architects attempted to put in a bunch of lines, and created these shapes and called it a swimming pool, and then they put a jacuzzi in there. This is the floor plan isolated, so you could have an idea on the size of the open space surrounding it. Translating that into the definition of spaces, we came up with this very basic conceptual diagram. Okay, so he wanted a grander entrance, so we've basically created a motor court with some nice paving and some patterns. And then he wanted a guest access, so we provided this linkage to the back and created a patio on the side here. They've originally provided an outdoor sitting, but we've looked at enhancing it further. He asked for a swimming pool, which we've located on this side because this is the widest spot that we have on plan. And also it would help enhance the views coming from these rooms. Okay, and then he wanted some service area to support his back of house. There's a little bit of an error in the graphic here because he's actually got a vehicular service access in here that connects to this service area at the back. But in the next slides, as we develop these designs, we'll illustrate how we've accounted for that. And then instead of creating designated parking base in here, we've just designed this entire area so that it could fit 4 cars, but then it would still look like a designed paved area. So translating that, well, you can see the uses. Can you guys read it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Read
So we've addressed the 5 requirements from the client, but then we wanted to create. We wanted to add more value into the design. And so we've developed this because this is the entrance. We've developed this into a side garden with slightly, distinct feature that is different from the rest of the landscapes. We've created a kitchen garden or an herb garden at the back here. Remember when we said that we wanted to create new ideas and we also wanted to complement adjacent spaces and uses. So we've associated the kitchen garden here at the back, so it associates with the kitchen. It provides a nicer view coming from these rooms, and it provided a different type of garden when compared to the rest of the landscape. On this corner, we've created just a big lawn space because we've asked the client if he has kids, and he has, I think, a couple at that time. So we thought that if we provide a big lawn space that could be used by the kids for playing, and if the client decides to add a play equipment in the future, he can easily add that to this corner. And it's relatively safe. It's away from the swimming pool area. And then we've created these raised decks to complement the pool deck, so that we play around with the spaces, and we sort of let this deck intersect with the swimming pool. So this is how we've tried to generate new ideas and tried to add more value to the landscape, which is more than what the client asked for. The client liked the ideas and liked the spaces that we've created for him, and he gave us an approval. And so from here, we usually, from a very solid functional diagram, that's how we create options. The options are, aesthetic. So it could be 2 or 3 types of styles and shapes, but generally follows the same arrangement. Because from one very good, effective arrangement of open spaces in a project, you can create multiple options in terms of the aesthetics. You can move things around and create. We'll always be able to create effective landscape layouts when you have your functionalities sorted out. So this is a quick study on one style, wherein we just, we've defined the paving spaces. We went with a very formal irregular style, using a lot of grids and dimension stone. So it looks a little bit, traditional in terms of the textures that we were creating and in terms of the shapes. But then it's symmetrical balance. Like we've got the square here, but it's not really symmetrical. But when you're viewing it from the living room, you see you've got a symmetrical view of the water wall and these 4 trees. And then the same goes for this angle. The axis over here, when you're viewing the pool going that way, there is still balance, even if the shapes are different, and then vice versa. This is a symmetrical space blending with a asymmetrical but balanced layout of the swimming pool. We try to do the same for all the other spaces around. A second option was going with a different type of paving style that looks more sleek and more modern. And we've introduced a little bit of these stepping or irregular arrangement of dimension stone on pavers to break it up a little bit and to give it a more modern style and feel. And then we've explored a third option. I mean, looking at the style of the villa, it looks very formal, but then you've got these circular shapes around. So we thought we'd explore a third option based on curvilinears, and we just went bonkers we've just put the curvilinears all over. We thought that we had the space to do sweeping curves. So we've come up with a totally different option, but still, if you take a look at the arrangement of spaces, they are the same. We created a raised deck here, but it's made of lawn rather than paving. We've created the pergola in here, but then this intersection with the swimming pool we've maintained. We still have the waterfalls in here. We've still provided the jacuzzi. Instead of putting that in here, we've moved it to one side. And then we've also addressed the service access at the back. In all three, we've addressed the service at the back, and we've provided some walls for privacy. Here we've provided walls wrapping around three sides of the swimming pool. Okay, and so with that, well, team curvilinear wins, and this is what the client approved. And so this is the final version, the final rendering of that concept, wherein it's more refined. Well, you can see the similarities here. We've provided some optional shading above the carports, but then we've designed this entire area as one paved space, and we've provided some patterns to enhance the design of this area. We've continued with the curvilinear, and we've raised the pool deck, I think 3 or 4 steps going up, so that you've got grading separation, which adds to privacy. We've got walls that are wrapping around this way. We've still got the lawn space in there. We've created the overhead planes in here to help frame the view and to provide a shaded spot in here. We've got the swimming pool, and we've played around with the layout of the walls. We've provided a more natural looking waterfall, and we've maintained the same theme for the pergolas. We've tucked in the barbecue and an outdoor shower in an offset wall at the back, and we've maintained this screening against the service access. On the other side, we've maintained the side garden in here. We've got the terrace, which is the entrance, the secondary entrance into the dining room here in the match list. We've added a water wall, and we've created another intimate space in here by introducing a pergola. So it goes up to this plane, and then it goes down again. We've addressed screening of these utilities and provided some lattice work, and this is still the herb garden. And then at the back here is your entire service area. So that's how that has been translated. I've got a few more slides here to show just the end product of the design. So this is at the entrance. This is a view of the lawn space and the entrance to the pool area. This is the side garden. The matchless terrace with the water wall. This is the herb garden, which just trying to highlight and show to the client that we were actually providing planting against this wall that we've created here that covers the utility. This is the steps going up to the pool area. We've played around with the levels of the walls. So we've got curvilinears on the base plane and on the vertical plane. We've provided a dip in the middle of that, and that's where the wear of the waterfall is. This is a view from the pergola. This is that part that extends into the swimming pool to create an effect of like a floating pergola and paving in a deck. This is the jacuzzi, which is raised and water falls down to the swimming pool. And we've created the shallow space. In the absence of a kids pool, we've created a shallow space that also becomes like a wet lounge. This is the service and how we've treated the back. The service access for the vehicles. And we've just compiled some reference images to just establish character and a handful of plant materials that we wanted, that we proposed for the project. Okay, so that's the residential project. The next sample let me stop the share and move to another one. Okay. Okay, so this is a boutique hotel, which have totally different requirements. And this is a medium size, I would say. I can't remember the actual size, must be at least 4 hectares. Well, I cannot disclose the identity of the hotel, but they are known for this. They create unique hotels that feature authentic local experiences, modern design, and intimate service. This is from their website. They say each hotel is as individual as its surroundings, and is also a reflection of them. You can taste the local flavor, blah blah blah. Essentially, what they create is, if they say, for example, they create a hotel in Manila, or a certain part of Manila. What they do with the design of the hotels is they try to feature the specific and the unique culture of that neighborhood. So you will have the same experience. So that hotel instantly belongs to that neighborhood. So this is the operator of the hotel that we were asked to design. This is the architect's plan of the hotel. This hotel is located inside a project called Sustainable City, which is a high-tech development. They've got solar panels on parking areas. They don't have roads. They don't have, well, they've got their parking areas away from the villas or from the houses. And when you park, you can get a golf cart or walk to your villa, depending on how far it is. And then all of those hybrid cars that owners have, or the golf carts, are all being charged by solar panels. This part here is the spine of their development, which is a linear park. The circles that you see there are greenhouses, wherein they have high-tech farming. They've got greenhouses. So the concept for this hotel, they wanted to feature farming, because that is being featured in this neighborhood. And UAE also has got some farming businesses in cooler parts of the country. So they wanted to feature that. They wanted to have vertical planting inside the hotel. They wanted to offer food that is grown by Sustainable City and the hotel itself. They created this very simple design with the pool and then water stepping down, but without really any structure. So they've asked us to take a look and come up with a unique concept for this hotel. Just to give you an idea on that hotel, this is the ground floor level. This is the floor above that. And then the next floor above it. These are just some money shots on the structure. From the other side, from the facade. And this is like in their proposed pool area. Another shot of the backside. And another. This is a shot of the inside. These are meant to be vegetables. Well, the rendering is bad, but that was the idea. You can see here, they've got vertical and then they've got hydroponics. Just a couple of elevations to show the expanse of the buildings and the scale, and how they've used terrain and slopes as part of their design. These are some sections for reference. So you can see here, this is that entire area that needs to be designed. This is the same plan, but I just wanted to reflect it in here as a reference to the next slide. What we try to establish when we're trying to create the spaces for them is we've established like five major areas or elements within the hotel. So you've got the pool and health club, which sits right next to the hotel. We've made use of some natural materials, boulders that are of local sources. We've capitalized on the levels. We're trying to introduce level drops into the landscape to open up the views of the hotel downwards from all around, and to exaggerate the level change. And it matches the overall concept of the hotel's architecture by playing off the slopes. We've introduced farming villas, which is the farming villa itself is not a new concept, but what we're trying to do is we wanted to integrate them into a little bit of fishing. So it's a relatively new idea. You come in. The idea is to have two levels where you enter from the top and then you go down and you experience the water. And we will show you some sections of these concepts. So you could sit on the deck there and do some fishing, or just dip your feet in the water in a natural looking fishing lake. And we're trying to match the architecture of the hotel as well in this. Then we've got the farms. We wanted to integrate actual farms or show farms that would feature traditional types of farming. This is a traditional irrigation system called falaj. You can see that here and there. That's being used in the Middle Eastern region. And then they also do greenhouses to maintain temperatures in their parks, in their farms. And then because we're playing with the terrain, we're proposing some terrace farms. And then to complement that, we're also introducing orchards. We wanted to create this type of experience wherein the very limited types of trees that fruit in the Middle East or in the UAE are featured. So it's totally different environment from the farms because of the canopy. And then we've created a fishing lake in the middle of the space. The idea is to have a place to eat that features, you could go fishing, you could catch a fish and you can have it cooked, just like what we have in Manila, but you don't have those in the UAE. So I wanted to bring in that experience and have a bit of aquaculture into the farming concept. Now, arranging all of those, so we've defined the spaces, we've created the spaces, and now we try to arrange them. An additional requirement that was given to us is that this yellow area are actually some show villas. The developer wanted to feature some of his villas that complement the hotel architecture, so he wanted to have them shown as part of this plot in here. So this is one of the options, conceptual layout that we proposed for them, identifying the 5 major areas that we've designed or that we've proposed. So you've got the show villas in here. We've established an entrance and a drop off, and then you've got the seafood restaurant here next to the fishing lake. So this is one area. And then up here, you've got terrace farms. You've got the orchard on the other side. So you've got farms on both sides of the villas. The villas here would have views of the farms at the back. And then this is like a raised area that wraps around the hotel, because this area here is raised. So we're matching the level of the all-day dining restaurant as part of the hotel and associating that with the main pool and a health club. And then we've got the farming villas on this corner that is associated with the system of the fishing lake. A second option that we've created has got the villas wrapped on this side, and we basically have the same arrangements, just different in sizes. But we favored this option because it capitalizes more on the grading strategy that we have in mind, which is, well, I will show you the grading strategy after this. This is how those areas were translated as a design. So you've got the entrance in here, and then you have the access going into the model villas in here. And then you have a small drop off for the seafood restaurant. And then you've got the fishing lake in here. Up here is you've got the terrace farm. The slope goes downwards that way. And then you've got the farming villas on this side. You've got the main pool area in here, which features some private pools and cabanas, and a larger infinity pool below. And then we've created a small health club in here, which has got a small lap pool and a mineral pool. All are very close to the all-day dining and the outdoor dining space that we created wrapping around it. And then here we've got the orchard. In terms of grading, this is the general grading that we propose for the area. We're in. This is a high point. Okay, this is also a high point, generally around the same level. And then we wanted to create a depression at the middle and make that the fishing lake. The idea is to collect as much water as possible, either with subsurface drainage or surface drainage, and then recycle the water and use it, have a little bit of aquaponics going on. Use the water of the fishing lake to irrigate some of the farm areas. And we also wanted to capitalize on the view, so we wanted this entire area to be looking down to the landscape. We've placed the villas in such a way too, because we wanted them to have like a terraced effect going down, so that when you're looking from the hotels, you don't see a big block or a big massive buildings. That you see, terraced arrangement in a curve. And then with the trees, we thought that it would look a lot better than just a single row of villas. This is how we've envisioned the amenities. You've got your all-day dining and outdoor dining. That section is there. And then it drops down to a lower level, which is the same as the pool deck. And then you've got the fishing lake below. This is a section through the main pool area. This is your hotel room. There's the path that goes around the hotel. This area is dropped, so it offers privacy. We've got water running down. That's a water wall. So that entire wall with the cabanas are all water walls. And then they've got their private shallow pool with a wet lounge. And then slightly lowered is the main swimming pool area. This is through the health club, the same strategy. You got the health club building, you've got jacuzzis, and then at the lower level, you've got your mineral pool. These are the farming villas. I mentioned 2 stories earlier. This level is the higher level is where you enter, and then it goes down below, and that matches the level of the landscape below. These are just very, very quick sketches just to give you an idea on these areas. These are the cabanas, and then those are the water walls, and then this is the main pool. These are the farming villas. You have these decks and paths. And then you've got the water underneath. This is just a view from the all-day dining area, just looking at the expanse of the landscape here. The orchard is over here, and these are like the terraced villas that we were trying to create, and we wanted to illustrate. This is just another view showing the swimming pools and the lake below it, and then part of the farming villas. Okay, so the last example, as I mentioned earlier, is quite comprehensive. I mean, it's very comprehensive in terms of discussing and defining the design vision and translating those into strategies, all of the considerations, and how all of those information and all of those concepts and strategies translate into actual zones in the project, and then ultimately defining spaces within those zones. So, yeah, I mean, in each project, especially the big projects, that is usually the process on how you arrive at creating and arranging your open spaces. Okay, so case study number 3. This is a public park. This was SGSD's proposal for a massive beach park in Tanzania. And this is the landscape design brief that we prepared. The landscape design brief essentially puts into paper in words and then translates them into ideas. All of these ideas and all of these elements. What's the reasoning behind creating the types of spaces and the types of amenities that we propose for the park? It is quite extensive, as you can see in the contents. We've got the project background, the very extensive discussion on the design strategies, and then we've translated these strategies and constraints pretty much like a thesis into a very basic bubble diagram. Okay, and then translate it into your concept design plans. We've also included here, we've looked at plot development strategy, phasing strategy, as a continuation or as in preparation for the project to be taken to detailed design. Okay. So the project site is in a very prominent part of town in Dar es Salaam, which is the capital of Tanzania. It's facing the Indian Ocean, and it's got 2 sites. This entire area is actually a beach frontage. Let me zoom in. This is an entire beach frontage, this side, facing the east. And this is primarily cliffside. And then there's a beach below here. There's a gap here because this space has already been acquired by a few hotels. So, we had to establish a connection through the streetscape. I'll go quick on the project background. This is just project understanding and the scope of work. And then we go to the design strategy. So we're looking at park amenities programming. We're looking at the retail amenities, vehicular circulation in park, foot traffic, maintenance and emergency, the aesthetics, the design of landscape elements, hardscape and softscape strategies, lighting, signage and furniture, grading, irrigation and drainage. So we start with an overall plan, an overall vision for the project. We wanted to design a public beachfront park which accommodates the wider district through the provision of a range of activities and active and passive recreational opportunities, facilities, and environmental improvements. So we've broken down that overall vision into some objectives, which are all of these. So we wanted to create a high quality scheme. We wanted to create a sustainable environment. We wanted to create access for all users and linkage to the surrounding transport systems when the transport systems come in. Create active and passive recreational areas. Create opportunities for varying programs of activity, meaning spaces that are multi-use. Provide car parking. Provide a commercial component by introducing food and beverage units to the beach and the park. Addressing the nature of the surrounding areas, meaning if there are residential neighborhoods, we are trying to be sensitive about our park activities next to it. Also, same goes for the hotel plus that are nearby. And then primarily acknowledging the needs of local residents because they are the target users. Beach amenities and utilities, including hotels, showers, and changing rooms, and create a lighting strategy so that the park is usable in the evening. Okay, well, just site context. This is the north side. It's nearby a fairly affluent part of town. It is, like I said earlier, the coastline is mainly cliffside. I think there's one spot here wherein like a little bit of beach, and we've used that spot to provide access. And then this is, I think, twice the length almost, but it's narrower. This is the south side, wide in here, and then it gets really narrow back here. So there's cliffside still on this part. Sorry, cliffside on this part, beach over here, and then cliffside again. So this is just a description of the neighborhood surrounding it, predominantly residential and institutional in nature. Opportunities and constraints for the project. Key opportunities. The place already has established users. There is actually an existing, this one here is an existing bar and restaurant called Cocoa Beach Bar. The quality of the beach is very nice, relatively flat and varying width of property, so suitable for various types of activities and spaces. There's existing mature vegetation that can be integrated, and then it's a quiet, low-density neighborhood in the surrounding areas. Constraints. You've got access, circulation, and or parking provisions because there's none present at the moment. So that needs to be addressed. There's the impact of creating destination within a quiet, low-density residential area, which we would try to mitigate by being careful with our placement of amenities in certain areas. And then, of course, there's the natural coastal risks, okay, associated with a beachfront. Okay, so this is what we established as an overall design concept to form distinctive character areas of active and passive use providing for a choice of interaction and isolation while providing continuity through design and access. So now it's from a very broad vision. We are starting to narrow down the types of spaces that we wanted to create. We're saying here active and passive spaces as a primary typology of spaces that we are trying to create, so that you will have varied experiences, and then all of them are interconnected. Okay, here we're saying too that we want to put in commercial activities into it, and we wanted to create some additional nodes that become gateways to the park. Okay, the commercial component is going to be primarily food and beverage that are going to be situated in specific areas, but then also at a smaller scale, distributed along the length of the park. Simply because it's a linear park, and you need to sort of distribute these types of units along that length. Okay, and we also wanted the park to be very porous, no barriers, everybody could go in. And so these are the aims of the principles, which is what I've already mentioned. In the end, this is what we're trying to create. Major amenity for the residents, a beach park for local residents, beach park that provides a variety of activities and creates a destination throughout the day and night. Have a beach promenade linking all of the activity zones. Park provides a benchmark for public realm improvements within Tanzania, and a destination with active and passive zones. Okay, now we're getting into the park amenities programming. We're now starting to define what sort of spaces and what sort of elements are going to be within the active areas. You got food and beverage areas, kiosks, sports facilities, water sports facilities, play areas, an outdoor amphitheater, which is a multi-use space, and other multi-use plazas for various and seasonal activities. In passive areas, we proposed picnic and barbecue areas, maybe some spaces for outdoor art installations, because we're going to have large areas of lawn spaces. We can have fountains and water features and nodes. We can have view decks that makes use of the cliffside. We've got lots of seating areas and picnic areas, and multi-use lawn spaces that could be used for informal sports, games, picnics, community gatherings. And then we've just, we've started, we've expounded more on how we want to define and how our commercial component by looking at our retail strategies. So this further defines the types of elements and the types of spaces that we are trying to create in these areas. Small to medium-sized restaurants, coffee shops, developed as anchor retail areas. You will have kiosks, which are a lot smaller, and like smaller buildings on their own, like you see in the images here. Sports learning centers, water sports and sports shops, news and magazine stands, ATM machines, vending machines, toilet showers and changing rooms. We thought this could also be a commercial component if you start charging for it. And then seasonal retail areas, such as plazas and paths converted to night markets. So, like this one, for example, when you're creating that space, you need to factor in different uses and proximities and connectivities for something like this. And it's also a multi-use area. could be a path that could also be used as a night market area. And then spaces for occasional events. um, uh, these are just some additional information on how we want to go about the development of kiosks and having flexibility for such. We thought that retail is very important because, like we are saying here, this is going to be a public park and it's going to be a major income generator to supplement the operations and maintenance of the free park. A lot of parks in the world fail because of funding, and not all parks, not all governments can afford to, fund properly the maintenance of parks. So by introducing commercial component into the large park, we are introducing activities, we are introducing variation of things to do, which is part of placemaking. If you could go to a place and can think of 10 things to do, then you've successfully created a successful place. And that is what we're trying to do here. In part, vehicular circulation, just discussing the connectivities that needs to be taken account, like parking areas, roadside parking, etc. Foot traffic and cycle circulation. We're basically creating a major promenade that connects everything, and then you have secondary paths on the side of the road as part of the streetscape. That is where we were proposing to have a bike lane for cycle traffic. And then, of course, because the main promenade is wider, we're going to be sizing it so that it would account for and could be used for maintenance and for emergencies. So you're paying for one. Okay, just aesthetics. The aesthetics is, I guess, beyond the identification of space planning. But it's in the report, and I would just mention that we've drawn the influence on the aesthetics from a local art, a local type of painting, which originated from the same neighborhood. So it was an obvious choice to pick up and interpret as part of the design elements in the landscape. So we're trying to interpret these paintings, these works of art, in terms of paving, in terms of planting, our furniture, and as murals, as walls, as works of art. Highly influenced, very colorful, lots of patterns, vivid colors. And then we're just discussing our hardscape and softscape strategies. These tie in to basically some maintenance and quality level that we want to have, because this is a public park. And then we're tying into this concept that the hardscape and the softscape in terms of patterning are going to be complementing the design of the other landscape elements within the park. Environmental lighting. We're going to create effects. We're going to create illumination so that the park is going to be usable when it's in the evenings. We think that the commercial component of the park would be very successful in the evening time as well. So it made sense to have, if not the full entirety of the park, partial areas within the park. Signage, site furnishings, and shading strategies, they would all go with the overall approach in aesthetics and functionalities as discussed previously, along with the hardscape and softscape and the landscape elements. Grading and landform. In terms of grading, we are respecting and we're trying to maintain as much as possible the landform or the levels in there. We've identified a couple of areas wherein it is a natural drainage channel. So we've proposed a design that respects that and doesn't touch that, and just enhance the landscape around that area. We're using landform to create interest in some parts of the park. Irrigation and drainage strategies, the same thing. Match local standards, alternative stormwater drainage strategies which goes with landform strategies and grading, maybe in collecting and diverting and bringing back stormwater into the ground. And then there's the existing natural conditions. We're basically saying here that we are respecting it, we're preserving it, we're trying to integrate it into our design. And you will see how that gets translated later. Streetscapes, it being a linear park next to a road, then the streetscape is a major component in this design. We're slowing down the traffic, we're improving safety. We're introducing roadside parking, but we're also creating a good buffer of planting to separate the park from the streets. Okay, so concept design. First, the site planning of it. So you've got your park centers, which is your retail areas. You've got your active areas, as discussed earlier, where you've got your water play, your playgrounds, sports facilities, etc. You've got your passive areas, which are your low intensity areas, picnic areas, multi-use open spaces, etc. We've identified the utility areas because we thought that it was a critical area to consider and to locate as part of our bubble diagram. And then we've also identified parking areas. We wanted to illustrate how we are associating the parking areas with our park centers. We've identified nodes, which would have, these are the entry points, the intersections, and these are the minor commercial areas that are distributed along the length of the park. And then we've identified the layout of the promenade, which links everything. And then we've also indicated all of the pedestrian linkages, the critical ones at least, that we have in mind for the project. This is a very high level bubble diagram because of the scale of it. We will try to show you what we've done. This part, okay, so if you remember, these are all cliffside. So we've created like a commercial component, and this part, the blue is your park center or your commercial component. And then we have, this is the main entrance, and then we've provided parking. We've provided like an admin building next to it, and we've created a node here because it is sort of like a jump off into the streetscape to connect to the other side. So we've established like a terminus or a node in there that connects you to the commercial component. This is the core of the commercial component. The pathway generally brings you to the other side. Another node, the promenade snakes in and out. You've got active area next to the commercial. You've got an interval of passive areas, a larger active area, and then passive and active again. And you've got parking on the roadside. On the other side, it's rather small, but let me zoom in. So initially, this was the idea. The existing bar is here, so we thought that we'd surround it with the commercial component, provide some parking, interval some active and passive areas in the same manner. Established nodes in natural connection points. You see that they are very close to the intersections. And that's how we've defined these locations. So intervaling of active and passive areas all the way to the end. And then we've translated that into a concept layout for each site. This is the landscape master plan for the north side. Let me shift to the next slide because it's more detailed so we can zoom in. Oops. Okay. So this north side, we've established the commercial component in here. We've decided to divide it into two and created a water park on one end, which would complement the hotels. It's isolated in one side. It's got its own parking. This layout inside a water park is purely illustrative because you need a specialist designer for that. We've attempted to create a layout that makes sense. And then here we've established our major commercial component, which is, well, a building. You've got a covered plaza. You've got smaller retail structures for food and beverage. There's no stopping the owner from putting some other shops in there, or even cinemas, small cinemas. But the idea is to have food beverage. I mean, this entire area could be designed as a small community mall. And then we've got water feature on that side. We thought that that would be used to compensate for the lack of access to the water. And then we've got all of these open spaces in between the edge. The promenade is over here, and the dining spaces. So you've created some varying widths and provided some canopy over it. Built canopy, which are these pergolas extending, and then you've got the tree canopy from the palms. And then you've got the central area that's covered, that is essentially open. Very similar to that elliptical open space that Mall of Asia has, and that's where the drop off is. And then you've got parking on both sides. You've got the admin building at this corner right here. We've allocated a little bit of open space here so that if ever this needs to extend, they can use that space. The commercial component, if you remember, this is meant to be an interval of active and passive uses. So we've extended an outdoor space in here that are kiosks. So basically a paved space, very, very flexible. You can have as many kiosks or food trucks in there. And then very close to just open spaces, multi-use, that can be used primarily as picnic areas. And then in between these two picnic areas, we've provided like a view deck, like a note with a play area. And then it transitions into a more active zone. Onto this part, we've got it's a lawn space, but it's sized as a football pitch. So when not in use, you don't have the lines. You just bring in a movable goal and you can play football. We've included like bleachers that look like park seats on both sides of it. And then we clustered them with a couple more sports courts. This could be tennis or basketball. We've just made use of the high points in here and created these viewing platforms. So the walk itself is already a very nice view with some steps going down, as you can see here. And then this is that spot that has a little bit of beach. So we provided like a little node there, and you can step down into the beach. This we proposed into a paintball site. Again, something that we thought, an activity that could associate with the nearby improvements, and also can be grouped in one larger active zone. So this is primarily active zone. This is passive mainly. A little bit of active in here, and then your commercial component, and then another commercial component. So that's how we've translated this site. Now moving on to, the south side landscape master plan. There's been some modifications on our design, the final design for this area. mainly in the commercial component. So we initially thought that it would make sense to have the commercial component centered and wrapping around this. This is the existing Cocoa Beach bar in this area. Okay, so we thought that we'd isolate it, and we didn't want to use the space because it's got the beach. So it didn't make a lot of difference to create a major commercial component in there. Furthermore, upon further investigation of this area, we initially thought our information was that the drainage channel was actually coming from this area and crossing this area, but then found out that there are actually two. We've got one here and one there. So those two zones we've retained. And then this big chunk of land next to these dramatic cliffside, we've played with the elevations in here. There's a natural terrain going downwards there. So we've made use of that as part of the amphitheater. Remember in the bullet points that I showed you about defining and creating open spaces, we said that, you know, the placement of these areas would respect or would consider the natural terrain, the natural features. This is one way on how we've elected to do that. We've used this natural feature and created an iconic restaurant in this area. This is a new idea, but we don't really have a lot of this in Tanzania. So in the context of the city, this is a new idea. The concept of an amphitheater with a top level full of restaurants with folks watching and looking downwards. That is something new in this area and in many parts of the world. So we have made use of this area. We've provided the parking as part of the commercial component. We have included this area as part of a spillover parking that would support if in case there's a huge event in this space. This corner, we've identified this as an active zone. So this is designed more like a pretty much like an adventure park, wherein you've got a zip line, you've got fairgrounds in there, so you've got trails and you've got play areas. You've got a forest play area, and you could put in a number of other activities in there. You've got a lookout point in this spot. And then we've got the main promenade running here, connecting into the commercial component down here, and then continuing down there. In front of the existing bar, what we've done to the bar is we've enhanced it by providing an outdoor dining space in front of it that's separated from the main promenade. We provided proper parking for it. And then the promenade goes this way, and this is where the beach starts and continues. The beach we've designed, we've intervaled. It provided toilets and toilets. So this entire area is just a park, very passive, that features the beach. Because we expect a lot of beach users, we've established a parking area in here. We've created a major node in here, and I will get to that later. This side of the beach park has got changing rooms here as well, and also parking. And this parking is shared with the water sports area, which we've located here. It's another active zone. Now, just going into this bit, we've created the space called Turtle Plaza, which has got commercial component around and a small water play in the middle. Water play that's free to use. So it is a unique landscape element. Water play in itself is not unique, but in this type of arrangement in a beach setting, we're in, there could be like small kiosks and food outlets in here or shops. moms could be out here, or parents could be out here eating while the kids are playing. It's that sort of arrangement. Okay, so I think my time is running out, but I'm about to finish. This is the water sports area. It's got its own maintenance yard and the center with parking. This is a continuation of that active zone wherein we've got more sports courts and a skate park. And then this is where the beach ends and the cliffside begins to increase again, and this level goes up higher. So what we've done is we've made use of the natural stones and natural terrain. We've created view decks on the side of the road. We've created this promenade that goes under it and up. We've created the detour made of the deck trail that is sitting on top of the cliffside. We've retained and enhanced the natural boulders in that area. We've created a small play area in here and a small picnic area into this to just to provide some additional flexible open space in this area. Another one in here. And then we've established, there's an existing lighthouse in this area. I forgot to mention that in the conceptual layout. And what we've done is we've introduced another commercial component that's very unique. That is a lighthouse restaurant. So it's making use of an existing lighthouse that is still operational and try to enhance it, provided parking for it, and made that, a terminus or an anchor activity area, a beginning and an end to this linear. Okay, so that's how that got translated. We don't have a lot of time, but so I will not say much about this, but we've just established, basically identified the types of plots that we wanted to create for parks, for retail, because those are income generating, and then parking, and then service plots, and then right-of-way improvements, which is basically improvements to the addition of parking, parallel parking on the existing road. With that, we've come up with phasing so that we know which one to build first, because it's impossible to build the entire park all at once, not with the funding available to government, and just because of the sheer size of the park. So this is the phasing strategy, and we've color coded the phasing in here just quickly. This is the commercial component goes in first. The Cocoa Beach bar area is second. This entire beach park is going to be third. And then phase 4 here, which is the other active zone. Phase 5 is this linear open space area, including the restaurant. And then we've elected to do the entire north side as part of phase 6. Okay, so that's, this is just moving forward. That essentially is how we've translated, how we've defined, how we've created, how we've arranged different types of open spaces, different types of amenities within our landscape into 3 different types of projects, different scale, different approaches, and different levels of difficulty and complication. I have that's the end of my discussion. I think we can begin with Q&A.
Thank you so much, landscape architect Leo. Thank you for that comprehensive talk on organizing and defining exterior spaces. I do hope our students were, able to take down notes on these different strategies on creating meaningful, multifunctional, and practical spaces in a project. Again, this is to remind everyone to send in your questions to our Zoom chat panel, or you could also comment via our YouTube channel. Our first question is from a student. He asked, do you have any specific tips on how to manage narrow spaces if the client wants a lot of features for his or her design.
A lot of what?
Features, sir.
Features.
Yes.
Features. Okay. Well, the way I handle narrow spaces is, well, you've got the usual tricks, wherein uh, you use a lot of vertical lines or lines that cross the shorter dimension of the space to create an image or the effect of a wider space. You could also use a bit of diagonals in doing so that distorts the perspective. You could create varying rooms, create sort of rooms along the length, along the length of the linear space. Basically, a smaller scale of what we've done. The park site, the last park site that we talked about, if you take a look at the overall scale of it, that's pretty narrow compared to the entire length of it. So what we've done there is we've basically intervals of, you could see that there's some repetition on the nodes, on the play areas, and on the park with just very small variations, but they are essentially the same. This is because you needed to treat a long piece of space, and you need to distribute all of the amenities. I mean, distance there is not your friend. So your circulation is very linear. Actually, the circulation is very simple. You have a promenade that runs all the way through, connecting everything. So in a larger scale, that's what you do. In a smaller scale, you could create rooms, and you could have different treatments or different types of uses for each room or different transitions. One thing that I know that's very difficult to do with narrow spaces are curvilinears. You could probably go with broken sweeping curves and do some random shapes and patterns. But if you're gonna force the, you know, curvilicious, no way. It's gonna be very difficult. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer. Students are typically overwhelmed by the amount of challenges and issues presented in a site. How do you manage as a member of, I guess, a large design team and address these issues in a project? This is important because our first year design students would work as a team for the first time.
Yeah. Well, my in my experience, and this thing is something that I practice until now. I like this topic that you've asked me to talk about, because the arrangement of spaces, site planning, yeah, looking at functionalities. These are your fundamentals in design. Okay. Uh, the residential sample is a very small is a very small project, very small scope, but the considerations, the fundamentals are the same. So you're looking at a big project. It's just a little bit more complicated with a bigger area and more layers of information. But then if you notice, the way I've approached the design of the residential, wherein I've created and defined spaces that, number one, requested by the client, and provided some complementing spaces to improve it, the way we've defined it, and well, the way we've connected, I was going to say, but it's a very, very simple connection, a circle around. Okay. But it's essentially the same process as the park, wherein there's just a lot of components to it. But the process is the same. You break it down, you start from a big idea, you try to define all of these elements, and you break them down. You find your role, you master the fundamentals, and you can work on any project now and then later. Because, like I said earlier, one functional diagram, one layout that works functionally and from a site planning perspective that is well thought out, you could come up with, 100 options, and you can never go wrong. And aesthetics is always subjective. You go with your functionalities, and it's going to be very difficult um, uh, to critique it, because it's you know all of the considerations, the important considerations.
All right, thanks for that, landscape architect. I guess we have to all respect the process and know our fundamental roles as a landscape architect and our responsibilities to our client.
Yep.
Another question from our student. Thank you for that informative talk. Did you have any difficult experiences in designing exterior spaces? If so, how did you consider the design factors deal in that experience?
Oh, too many. Too many. Eh, when you've designed a lot, or when you're designing a plate, you would have these zero moments wherein you're staring at the project like for days, even. Okay, you attempt to come up with a design, and then you try to explore other design options, but then you end up going back to a design, or having a design that looks very similar to the first one that you've done. You try rotating your paper, and you're rotating the side so that you'll be able to see the side differently. You've just tried everything and still nothing. Okay, I mean, there are times like that when you're designing. Best thing to do is stop doing that, look for another thing to do, and then revisit it. And then if you run out of time, just go with the first design that you came up with. Okay. Now,
All right.
when there is a lot of research in design, like for example, when I was looking at the retail component of that park, when I was looking at the farming, the farming concepts for the hotel, it involved a lot of research. So you don't go ahead, you don't just go and propose these ideas, these new ideas. You need to back that up with information on sizing, information on how much it will cost, information on, is it really something that you can operate, before you call it a bright idea.
All right, sir. Since you've mentioned the research component of the design process, I like that you showcased different design options for a project. Our students are undeniably fresh with tons of new ideas and new concepts that they want to bring into a design plate. Some are successful, some aren't. What would you recommend to our students so they could bring in their ideas and concepts together, I guess, in a concise and a meaningful manner?
The second book that I mentioned, Residential Landscape Architecture, read it. Okay, it is, I would say, it is my go-to book. It has a very, very good description of, like, it goes into detail as to what space is. Okay, very detailed explanation of what an element in your landscape does, what it can offer, and how that applies to, well, the examples are limited to residential landscape design, but it's going to tell you what is a good curve, what is a nice curve, what is a bad curve, what is an angular way of doing things, what is a curvilinear way, a rectilinear, what is a symmetrical, balanced, symmetrical, asymmetrical. All of these concepts, in order for you to understand very basic composition. Okay, read it. Okay, read it, study it, sleep with it. Because once you've mastered the fundamentals in there isn't any project that you can't design and you can't come up with a layout for.
All right, thank you so much, sir. All the hot questions are coming in. So this is from the YouTube live channel. Good day, sir. Do you have any tips on creating functional and aesthetic entry and exit spaces for outdoor areas?
That is a tough question because the design will always be relative. Okay, the design of your entryways. I mean, if it's in a park, for example, that entrance area, typically you design that as a big plaza that is sort of like a landing. Okay, your gateway into the park. From that space, okay, from that space, the signage tells you that this is the way to one part of the park. That is the way to one part of the park. That establishes a visual access towards another prominent feature in the park. So that could be one role of an entrance for the park. An entrance to a different type of project will be a lot different. You know, like in that villa, it is basically a paving pattern that shows up the entire facade of the building. In the hotel, that was a simple cul-de-sac drop off in front of the fishing restaurant. That is essentially my entrance to the park there, as far as a proper drop off point is concerned. So it's very difficult to give a specific answer because the entrances would vary depending on the type of project.
All right, thank you so much for that, landscape architect Leo. Um, this is not a question, but I guess a congratulatory message from our YouTube viewer. Thank you, landscape architect Leo, for that very good presentation. Thank you for your knowledge regarding organizing exterior spaces and landscape design. God bless you. And to and to wrap up our session for today, and I guess to give us a quick key highlights of all the things that landscape architect Leo have carefully enumerated and shared to all of us, may we call on Professor Dan Villajuan?
Okay. Thank you, Professor Charles. Good morning, everyone. So just a quick wrap up of this morning's webinar. First off, I think landscape architect Leo hit the nail directly, on the head with his presentation with regards to our topic on organizing exterior spaces. The um, the first year students, most especially, have as their core learning set, for their freshman year is, of course, the items that were discussed by landscape architect Leo, covering the volumetric elements of containment, the importance of these core components in designing or creating an experiential space. Okay, the 3 dimensions. Of course, we also have to consider, that the landscape also matures. So there's that fourth dimension in a way. Uh, these 3 components, they are, of course, very, very important. We started this, of course, in our first semester, but of course, it doesn't mean that we don't continue. We have to keep using or keep working with these volumetric elements of containment, the base plane, the vertical, and the overhead plane. Not just, we don't end in our first year, but we continue in our succeeding semester. So our students, through this presentation by Sir Leo, can use this. Okay, you students can apply this. Sir Leo presented very good examples of key concepts of the key principles that we have also covered in our previous semester, and what we will also cover in the second semester. In fact, he may have already completed our lecture set for second sem, but it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, but it's a good thing that we have landscape architect Leo this morning presenting to us. He initiated the presentation with the definition, so it keeps us, or it put us in the in the right mindset, in a way of understanding the organization of exterior spaces. He provided us with several examples, starting from residential. Okay, these are seemingly small scale, but of course infused with the not just working with the fundamental principles or these core elements of landscape design, but diving deeper into what we should consider when we design not just residentials but other types of development. We have to consider atmosphere, rainfall, sunlight, wind, the requirements of the user. Of course, we have to look at this in reference with the environment that we are designing on. We have to have a solid design vision. We have to utilize sound principles and strategies. We have to complement or support adjacent use areas or spaces. Very important with his presentation, with the presentation of L.R. Leo, was the idea that we have to generate new ideas. It's not enough that you copy or you take off from, for example, an existing design and you copy that, but you have to look at the principles behind these existing designs and then innovate, okay, so that it's suitable for the site. Okay, connectivity is important as presented by landscape architect Leo. Adherence to existing site conditions. Okay. Um, he also presented to us some concepts, principles on site planning as applied in the other examples that he showcased, especially with the hotel and the beach park. He showed us the importance of establishing identity for a project to give it character and uniqueness, the importance of creating, preserving, and enhancing views, okay, things that need to be experienced by the users of our space, our exterior spaces. Okay, the importance as well of complementing the architecture. Okay, an example, okay, his presentation on the hotel was an example of innovation, okay, by merging um, the farm component into the development. So seemingly unsuitable uses, but he was able to merge them properly. Okay, last presentation or example was the beach park, which was a showcase, an example of the kind of service that landscape architects provide, whether the client is private or public. Design strategy per hardscape and softscape elements proposed. The utilities and other infrastructure was also presented. But more importantly, I guess, this is an example of the importance of process, research, importance of methodology. It's an information-rich presentation that enables the feasibility of the project. And this mindset is what we want to instill in our students, in all our students. So I hope that our students see the bigger picture of landscape architecture in the presentation of landscape architect Leo Gonzales through his of course, through his presentation of some of his projects that range from small scale to large scale developments. Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Char.
Thank you so much, Professor Dan. And I guess thank you also to our speaker for today, landscape architect Leo Gonzales. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and a big chunk of your time this morning to share your experiences to our students. And to everyone, thank you for joining us today, be it you're streaming via our YouTube channel or you joined us via our Zoom meeting. Thanks, everyone, and see you next Tuesday for another interesting
Picture
webinar.
taking, Sir Charles.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
Sir. Maybe we can stop the YouTube live,
Recording.
sir.
Yes.
Okay.